The autumn rain fell in sheets across the muddy streets of Deadwood Gulch, turning the ramshackle mining town into a maze of treacherous puddles and slick boardwalks. Most decent folks had taken shelter hours ago, leaving only the desperate and the damned to navigate the storm-lashed darkness. Samuel Hayes pulled his coat tighter against the driving wind as he guided his horse through the worst of it, searching for the Silver Dollar Tavern where he was supposed to meet Jake Morrison. About purchasing cattle, the meeting had been arranged weeks ago, but Sam was already regretting the journey from his ranch 50 miles south. Something about Morrison had always set his teeth on edge. The man's eyes were too calculating, his smile too quick to appear and disappear. The Silver Dollar squatted at the end of the street like a bloated toad, yellow light spilling from its grimy windows onto the muddy road. Sam could hear raucous laughter and off-key piano music even over the howling wind. He dismounted and tied his horse to the hitching post, steeling himself for what was sure to be an unpleasant evening of negotiations with one of the territory's most notorious cattle dealers. As he rounded the corner of the building, heading for the back entrance Morrison had specified in his telegram, Sam stopped dead in his tracks. There, chained to a wooden post behind the tavern like an animal, was a young woman. She was barely conscious, her dark hair plastered to her skull by the rain, her dress what remained of it torn and filthy. Heavy iron shackles bound her wrists, connected by a short chain to a metal collar round her throat. She couldn't have been more than 20 years old, but her face bore the hollow look of someone who had seen too much cruelty for her tender years. Sam felt rage surge through him like wildfire. He'd seen many terrible things during his years on the frontier: Indian raids, claim jumpers, men killed over poker hands, but this deliberate brutality toward a defenseless woman struck him as the lowest form of evil. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, rushing to her side and kneeling in the mud. Miss, can you hear me?" The woman's eyes fluttered open, deep brown, like rich coffee, but filled with a terror so profound it made Sam's heart clench. She tried to speak but only managed a broken whisper. "Please don't hurt me anymore." "I'm not going to hurt you," Sam said gently, his hands already working at the locks on her shackles. "My name's Samuel Hayes. I'm going to get you out of here." The locks were new and strong, but Sam had come prepared for his business meeting. He pulled out his skinning knife and began working at the leather straps that secured the iron collar around her throat. The woman watched him with a mixture of hope and disbelief, as if kindness was so foreign to her experience that she couldn't quite trust it. "What's your name?" Sam asked, trying to keep her conscious and alert while he worked. "Elena," she whispered. "Elena Vasquez." "Well, Elena Vasquez, you're going to be just fine. I promise you that." The sound of boots splashing through puddles made them both freeze. Sam's hand instinctively moved to the Colt at his hip as a burly man in a stained leather apron appeared around the corner of the building. "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" the man bellowed, his face flushed with drink and anger. "That there's private property." "Private property?" Sam rose slowly, his hand still resting on his gun. "You mean this woman?" "Damn right I do. She owes me money, and she's working it off. Now get away from her before I call the sheriff." Sam's eyes narrowed. "What's your name, mister?" "Ezra Polk. I own this establishment, and that Mexican whore ran up a debt she couldn't pay, so now she pays it off the only way she can. Perfectly legal arrangement. Legal, maybe, but not right." Sam's voice carried the quiet authority of a man who'd faced down his share of trouble. "What's her debt?" Polk's eyes glittered with greed. $200, plus interest, plus room and board while she's been staying here. It was highway robbery, and they both knew it. No woman could possibly run up such a debt at a frontier tavern without being deliberately cheated. But Sam had come to town with money for cattle, and right now he could think of no better use for it. "I'll pay her debt," he said simply. Polk's jaw dropped. "You, what? $200? Right now, in exchange, you release her and never bother her again." The tavern owner's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What's your interest in her, stranger?" "She ain't much to look at in her current state." Sam felt his temper flare, but he kept his voice level. "My interest is in seeing justice done. Do we have a deal or not?" Polk considered this. clearly weighing his greed against his desire to keep Elena as his personal slave. Finally, avarice won out. 200, cash on the barrel head, and you take her away tonight. I don't want to see either of you round here again. Sam pulled out his money roll and counted out the bills, hating every second of the transaction, but knowing it was Elena's only chance at freedom. Polk snatched the money and produced a key from his pocket, unlocking the shackles with the casual indifference of a man freeing a dog from its leash. Elena collapsed forward as the chains fell away, and Sam caught her before she could hit the muddy ground. She weighed almost nothing, her body wasted from poor food and hard treatment. He lifted her easily in his arms, feeling the tremor that ran through her frame. "You're safe now," he murmured against her rain-soaked hair. "I'm taking you home." Elena looked up at him with those coffee-dark eyes, searching his face for some sign of deception or ulterior motive. When she found none, tears began to stream down her cheeks, not tears of sorrow, but of relief so profound it shook her entire body. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Sam considered the question as he carried her toward his horse. Why indeed? He could have walked away, conducted his business with Morrison, and ridden home without ever knowing about Elena's plight. It would have been the safe thing to do, the practical thing, because it was the right thing to do, he said finally, and because everyone deserves a chance at freedom. He helped Elena onto his horse, then swung up behind her, wrapping his coat around her shivering form. As they rode out of Deadwood Gulch into the storm-swept night, Sam found himself wondering what he'd gotten himself into. He'd come to town to buy cattle and was returning home with a traumatized young woman who had nowhere else to go. His ranch was a 2-day ride through dangerous country, and he had no idea what Elena's story was beyond the obvious signs of abuse. For all he knew, she could be running from the law herself, or have enemies who would come looking for her. Taking her home could bring trouble to his door. But as he felt her gradually relax against him, her breathing becoming deeper and more regular as exhaustion and relief overwhelmed her, Sam knew he'd made the right choice. Whatever complications might arise, he couldn't have left her chained behind that tavern like an animal. The storm began to clear as they rode south, stars appearing between the racing clouds like scattered diamonds. Elena had fallen asleep in his arms, trusting him with a faith that both humbled and terrified him. He'd saved her life tonight, but now he had to figure out what came next. Samuel Hayes had always been a solitary man, content with his cattle and his books and the vast silence of the Montana Territory. But as he rode through the night with Elena's warm weight against his chest, he began to understand that his quiet life was about to change in ways he couldn't yet imagine. Behind them, Deadwood Gulch disappeared into the darkness, taking with it the worst chapter of Elena's life. Ahead lay the unknown territory of hope, healing, and perhaps something neither of them dared to name yet. The lonely rancher had cut the rope and carried her home. Now the real journey could begin. Dawn broke across the Montana Territory in shades of gold and crimson, painting the endless grasslands in colors that seemed to promise redemption. Samuel Hayes reined in his horse at the crest of a low hill, allowing Elena her first glimpse of the Broken Arrow Ranch spread out in the valley below. "Home," he said simply, and felt her stir against him as she awakened from the exhausted sleep that had claimed her. During their night ride, Elena lifted her head slowly, wincing at the movement. Every muscle in her body ached from months of abuse and the uncomfortable ride. But as her eyes took in the sight before them, she felt something she hadn't experienced in so long she'd almost forgotten what it was. Peace. The ranch house was modest but well-built, constructed of hewn logs with a wide front porch that faced the rising sun. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, suggesting warmth and comfort within. Corrals held a small herd of horses, and cattle dotted the distant pastures like scattered brown stones. It was a place built by honest work, maintained with care, and it spoke of a man who took pride in what he'd accomplished. "It's beautiful," Elena whispered, her voice still hoarse from her ordeal. "It's not much," Sam replied, though she could hear the quiet pride in his voice. "But it's mine, built with my own hands, and it's safe, safe." The word carried more weight than gold to Elena. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt truly Safe anywhere. As they rode down into the valley, a dog came bounding out to greet them, a black and white border collie with intelligent eyes and a tail that wagged with pure joy at his master's return. Behind the dog came an elderly Mexican man, his weathered face creased with concern as he took in the sight of Sam returning with a passenger. "Señor Sam," the man called out in accented English. "We were worried when you did not return last night. Had some business to attend to, Carlos," Sam replied, dismounting and then carefully helping Elena down from the horse, her legs buckled. The moment her feet touched the ground and Sam caught her before she could fall. "Carlos, this is Elena Vasquez. She'll be staying with us for a while." Carlos was in his 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes that had seen their share of life's hardships. As his gaze took in Elena's torn dress, the rope burns on her wrists, and the hollow exhaustion in her face, his expression shifted to one of understanding and compassion. "Señorita," he said gently, removing his hat, "you are welcome here. I am Carlos Mendoza, and this is my wife, Maria." As if summoned by her name, a plump woman with graying hair and a warm smile emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. Maria took one look at Elena and immediately shifted into maternal mode, clucking her tongue and reaching out to steady the young woman. Pobrecita," Maria murmured, her motherly instincts taking over. "Look at you, so thin, so tired. Come, Mija, let Maria take care of you." Elena found herself swept up in Maria's gentle but determined care, barely able to protest as the older woman guided her toward the house. It had been so long since anyone had shown her genuine kindness that she felt tears threatening again. "Maria will get you cleaned up and fed," Sam said, following behind them. "There's a spare room at the back of the house that should suit you fine. Carlos, could you see to my horse and maybe heat some water for a bath?" "See, of course," Carlos replied, leading the tired horse toward the barn. The border collie, whose name Elena learned was Scout, trotted alongside them, occasionally looking back at the newcomer with curious but friendly eyes. Inside, the ranch house was as welcoming as its exterior had promised. The main room featured a stone fireplace, comfortable furniture built for practicality rather than show, and shelves lined with more books than Elena had ever seen in a private home. Everything was clean and well-maintained, but it lacked the feminine touches that would indicate a woman's presence. "You live here alone?" Elena asked Sam as Maria bustled around, gathering towels and soap. "Just me, Carlos, and Maria," Sam confirmed. "They've been with me since I started this place 3 years ago. Carlos is the best horse trainer in the territory, and Maria," he smiled fondly, "well, Maria keeps us all from starving or living like complete savages." Maria laughed at this, swatting at Sam with her dish towel. This one, he thinks he can live on coffee and hardtack if I let him. Men, they have no sense when it comes to taking care of themselves." She turned to Elena with the kind of warm, maternal concern that made the young woman's throat tighten with emotion. "Come, Mija, the water will be ready soon, and then we get you some proper food. You are safe now. You understand, whatever happened before, it is finished." Elena nodded, not trusting her voice to speak. She followed Maria to a small but comfortable room at the back of the house, featuring a simple bed with clean quilts, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the prairie. It was more luxury than she'd known in months. "The bath will help," Maria said kindly, setting towels on the bed, "and I have some clothes that might fit you. My daughter's things. She married and moved to California, but she left some dresses behind when the hot water arrived, carried in buckets by Carlos and Sam." Elena found herself alone for the first time since her rescue. She sank into the copper tub with a sigh of pure relief, feeling months of dirt and degradation wash away. With the warm water, the soap smelled of lavender, a scent so clean and feminine it made her remember who she used to be. Before Deadwood Gulch, before Ezra Polk, before her world had fallen apart. The dress Maria brought was simple but well-made, a soft blue cotton that complemented Elena's dark hair and eyes. It was a little loose. Elena had lost considerable weight during her captivity, but it was clean and whole, and wearing it made her feel human again. When she emerged from the room, she found Sam sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. His expression thoughtful. He looked up as she approached, and Elena saw something shift in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, at how different she looked when clean and properly dressed. "Feel better?" he asked gently. "Much better, thank you," Elena replied. Settling into the chair across from him, Maria immediately appeared with a plate heaped with eggs, beans, and fresh bread, setting it before Elena with motherly authority. "Eat," Maria commanded. "All of it. You are too thin." Elena didn't need to be told twice. The food was simple but delicious, and she realized she was hungrier than she'd thought possible. As she ate, she became aware of Sam watching her with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to," he said quietly. "But if you're comfortable sharing, how did you end up in Polk's place?" Elena set down her fork, her appetite suddenly diminished. The memories were still too fresh, too painful. But she owed this man some explanation for his kindness. "My family had a small farm near Santa Fe." She began slowly. "My parents died of fever last spring, and I came north looking for work. I heard there were opportunities in the mining towns, maybe as a cook or seamstress." Sam nodded encouragingly, but Elena could see the understanding dawning in his eyes. He'd probably seen this story before young women lured to frontier towns, with promises of honest work, only to find themselves trapped in situations they couldn't escape. "I got to Deadwood Gulch with almost no money," Elena continued. "Polk offered me a job at his tavern, said I could work off my room and board. But the prices he charged for everything were," she shook her head, "no one could ever work off those debts. And when I tried to leave, she didn't need to finish." The rope burns on her wrists, and the haunted look in her eyes told the rest of the story. "I'm sorry," Sam said simply. "No one should have to endure what you went through." "Why? Did you help me?" Elena asked suddenly. "You could have walked away. Most men would have." Sam considered this, staring into his coffee as if it might hold the answer. "My sister," he said finally. "I had a younger sister, back in Missouri, Sarah. She was about your age when something similar happened to her." Elena felt her heart clench. "What happened to her?" "She died," Sam said quietly. "Took her own life rather than live with what had been done to her. I wasn't there to help her, wasn't there to protect her, but I was there last night, and I could help you. So I did." The pain in his voice was raw, honest, and Elena understood now why he'd been willing to pay her debt without question, why he'd brought her to his home without knowing anything about her. She wasn't just a stranger in need, she was his chance at redemption, his opportunity to save the sister he'd lost. "I'm not your sister," Elena said gently. "No," Sam agreed. "But maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe helping you helps both of us." Over the following days, Elena began to understand what Sam meant. The Broken Arrow Ranch became a haven where she could slowly remember who she was beneath the trauma and fear. Maria fussed over her like a beloved daughter, insisting she eat more and rest often. Carlos taught her about the horses, showing her how to read their moods and movements. Scout adopted her as his second favorite human, following her around the ranch with devoted loyalty. And Sam gave her something she hadn't expected: respect. He never pressed her for details about her past, never made her feel like she owed him anything beyond simple human courtesy. He treated her like a guest, not a burden. And slowly Elena began to believe that she might actually be safe. But as the days passed, Elena became increasingly aware that her presence was changing. The dynamics of the ranch. She saw how Sam watched her when he thought she wasn't looking, saw the careful way he maintained distance between them, as if he was afraid of crossing some invisible line. She was grateful for his respect, but she was also beginning to realize that gratitude wasn't the only emotion Samuel Hayes inspired in her. There was something about his quiet strength, his fundamental decency, that called to parts of her heart she'd thought were dead forever. The question was, what did she do about it? And more importantly, what would Sam do if he knew that the broken woman he'd rescued was beginning to fall in love with her rescuer? 2 weeks had passed since Elena's arrival at the Broken Arrow Ranch, and the autumn air carried the crisp promise of winter. She stood at the kitchen window, watching Sam work with a difficult stallion in the corral, his movements patient and sure as he coaxed the animal to accept a saddle. There was something mesmerizing about the way he moved, no wasted motion, no unnecessary force, just quiet competence and an innate understanding of the creatures he worked with. "He is a good man, that one," Maria said softly, appearing at Elena's shoulder with a knowing smile. "But he carries much sadness." See, Elena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Over the past weeks, she glimpsed the depth of Sam's loneliness, the way he sometimes stared off into the distance with an expression of profound loss. He'd saved her from a nightmare, but she was beginning to understand that he was fighting demons of his own. "He needs someone," Maria continued, her voice gentle but pointed. "Someone to remind him that life is for the living, not just for remembering the dead." Before Elena could respond, Scout's sharp bark echoed across the yard, followed by the thunder of approaching hoof beats. Sam immediately stopped his work with the stallion, his hand moving instinctively to the rifle he kept propped against the corral fence. Elena felt her blood turn to ice as she recognized the lead rider, a man she'd hoped never to see again. Ezra Polk sat his horse with the arrogant confidence of someone accustomed to taking what he wanted by force. Behind him rode 4 other men, all armed, all wearing the hard expressions of hired guns. Elena's hands began to shake as the memories of her captivity came flooding back, the chains, the beatings, the constant fear. "Get back from the window," Elena whispered to Maria, her voice tight with terror. "Get Carlos and hide in the root cellar. Don't come out no matter what you hear." But Maria was made of sterner stuff than that. She took one look at Elena's ashen face and immediately understood the situation. "That man, he is the one who hurt you." Elena nodded, unable to speak as panic clawed at her throat. She watched Sam walk out to meet the riders, his rifle held casually but ready. Even outnumbered 5 to 1, he showed no sign of fear or intimidation. "You're trespassing," Sam called out, his voice carrying clearly across the yard. "State your business or move on." Polk dismounted with deliberate slowness, his eyes scanning the ranch buildings with proprietary interest. "Name's Ezra Polk. I believe you have something that belongs to me." "Nothing here belongs to you," Sam replied calmly. "I suggest you get back on your horse and ride out while you still can." Polk laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "That Mexican whore you stole from me is worth a lot more than the 200 you paid." See, she witnessed something she shouldn't have, a business transaction that certain parties would prefer remain private. Some influential folks in Denver are willing to pay handsomely for her return. Elena's blood chilled. She remembered now the night before her final attempt to escape. She'd seen Polk meeting with well-dressed men behind the tavern, money changing hands along with what looked like stolen cattle brands. She'd been too terrified at the time to understand the significance, but apparently her potential testimony posed a threat to more than just Polk's illegal operations. "She's not property," Sam said, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. "And she's not going anywhere." "Oh, but she is," Polk replied, signaling to his men. "See, I brought the proper documentation this time, a warrant for her arrest on charges of theft, signed by a judge in Denver." He pulled out a folded paper and waved it mockingly. Elena knew it was probably forged, but in frontier justice, possession of an official-looking document often carried more weight than truth. "Even if that warrant's genuine," Sam said, "she's entitled to a hearing. You can't just drag her away." "Can't I?" Polk's hand moved to his gun. "Seems to me like a man living alone out here might have an accident. Shame if something happened to him while resisting a lawful arrest." The threat hung in the air like smoke from a wildfire. Elena knew she had to act. Sam had already risked too much for her, and she wouldn't let him die because of her problems. She started toward the door, but Maria caught her arm. "No, Mija," the older woman said firmly. "There's another way." Before Elena could ask what she meant, Maria was moving with surprising speed for her age, pulling open a cabinet and retrieving something Elena hadn't known was there: a double-barreled shotgun, well-maintained and clearly functional. "Carlos," Maria called out in Spanish. "Ven acá, tenemos problemas." Within moments, Carlos appeared from the barn, carrying his own rifle and moving with the practiced efficiency of a man who'd faced trouble before. As he took position at the side of the house, Elena realized she'd underestimated the people who'd taken her in. They weren't just kind-hearted ranch hands, they were Sam's family, and they would fight to protect what was theirs. Outside, the standoff continued. Polk's men had spread out in a rough semicircle, but they seemed less confident now that they faced not just one man, but clearly an organized defense. "You're outnumbered, Brennan," Polk called out. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." "Funny thing about numbers," Sam replied, not moving from his position. "They don't always tell the whole story." As if on cue, the sound of approaching riders echoed from the far side of the ranch. Elena's heart leaped as she recognized the lead horseman, Sheriff Dan Morrison, accompanied by 3 of his deputies. Unlike the corrupt officials Polk was accustomed to dealing with, Morrison had a reputation for honesty that extended throughout the territory. Polk's face went pale as he recognized the sheriff. "Morrison, didn't expect to see you out this way." "Ezra," the sheriff replied with obvious distaste. "Got a telegram from Denver yesterday. Seems there's a federal warrant out for your arrest. Something about cattle rustling and murder. Funny thing is, the judge who supposedly signed your warrant for the girl died 3 weeks ago." The forged warrant fluttered from Polk's suddenly nerveless fingers. His men began to shift nervously, clearly recognizing that the situation had turned decisively against them. "Now, you can come with me peaceful-like," Morrison continued, "or we can do this the hard way. Makes no difference to me." Polk's hand twitched toward his gun, but Sam's rifle was already trained on him. "I wouldn't," Sam advised quietly. "You're already looking at a rope. Don't make it worse." For a moment, Elena thought Polk might try to fight his way out. His face was twisted with rage and desperation, the look of a man who'd finally been cornered. But the odds were simply too overwhelming. One by one, his men raised their hands and surrendered. As Morrison's deputies began collecting weapons and placing the men under arrest, Elena finally found the courage to step outside. Polk's eyes fixed on her with such hatred that she felt a chill run down her spine. "This isn't over," he snarled as the deputies bound his hands. "You think you're safe here? There are others who want you dead, girl. People with longer reach than mine." "Maybe," Sam said, stepping between Polk and Elena. "But they'll have to go through me to get her, and I promise you, that won't be easy." As the prisoners were loaded onto horses and prepared for transport back to town, Sheriff Morrison approached Sam and Elena. He was a lean man in his 40s, with gray-streaked hair and eyes that had seen their share of frontier justice. "Miss Vasquez," he said, touching his hat respectfully, "I want to apologize for what you've been through. If you're willing to testify against Polk and his associates in Denver, I can guarantee you'll have protection." Elena looked at Sam, seeking guidance. The thought of facing her tormentors in court terrified her, but she also understood that her testimony might be the key to stopping them from hurting other women. "You don't have to decide right now," Sam said gently. "But Elena, if you choose to testify, I'll be there with you. You won't face it alone." The promise in his voice was absolute, and Elena felt something settle inside her chest, not just gratitude, but a deep, abiding trust. This man had already proven he would risk everything to protect her. Whatever came next, they would face it together. "I'll testify," she said quietly, "but not today. I need time to prepare myself." Morrison nodded understandingly. "Take all the time you need, miss. Justice has waited this long, it can wait a little longer." As the sheriff and his prisoners rode away, Elena found herself standing beside Sam in the gathering dusk, watching the dust settle on the road. The immediate danger had passed, but Polk's final words echoed in her mind. There would be others, men with power and influence, who wanted her silenced permanently. "You're thinking about what he said," Sam observed, reading her expression with the accuracy that still surprised her. "Aren't you worried?" Elena asked, "about what this might bring to your door?" Sam was quiet for a moment, watching the last light fade from the western sky. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a decision that had been building for weeks. "Elena," he said softly, "I've been alone for a long time. Built this place to be a refuge, somewhere I could hide from the world and my own failures. But these past weeks, watching you heal, seeing you become yourself again." He paused, struggling with words that didn't come easily to a man accustomed to solitude. You've reminded me that some things are worth fighting for, that maybe I don't have to carry my guilt alone. Elena felt her heart stop. Was he saying what she thought he was saying? I know I'm not much, Sam continued, his eyes fixed on the horizon, a rancher with a small spread and a complicated past. But if you'll have me, if you think you could ever care for a man like me, I'd like to ask you to stay, not as my guest, but as my wife. The proposal hung between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. Elena stared at him, seeing not just the man who'd saved her, but the one who'd shown her what love could look like when it was freely given rather than demanded or purchased. Sam, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, I already care for you, more than I thought possible after everything I've been through. He turned to face her then, and Elena saw hope flickering in his dark eyes like candlelight in a window. Is that a yes? Instead of answering with words, Elena stepped closer and took his hands in hers. They were callous from honest work, strong and gentle at the same time, hands that had cut her chains and offered her freedom. Yes, she said simply. Yes, Samuel Hayes, I'll marry you. As he pulled her into his arms, Elena felt the last of her chains fall away, not the iron ones Polk had bound her with, but the invisible shackles of fear and self-doubt that had held her captive long after her physical rescue. In Sam's embrace, she found not just safety, but the promise of a love built on respect, trust, and the shared understanding of what it meant to choose hope over despair. The shadows of the past would always be with them, but they would face whatever came together, and that, Elena thought as Sam's lips found hers, made all the difference in the world.